You're listening to The Big Album Show with Paul Dillon and Dan O'Neill.
Arthur Scario, General Secretary of the Socialist Labour Party, wishing the magnificent Manic Street Preachers every success in the next century. I'm certain that their brand of music will be an inspiration to future generations, just as it is today. Their music provides an alternative. There is another way. The Manic Street Preachers tell you what it is. It's to resist inequality, injustice, and do not tolerate those who tell you otherwise. Good luck and best wishes to you all.
Hello, and welcome to The Big Album Show. I'm Dan.
And I'm Paul.
This is your bi-weekly podcast about albums from brilliant bands celebrating big birthdays. Today we're discussing Everything Must Go by the Welsh rock band Manic Street Preachers. Released the 20th of May 1996, it was the band's first album released after the sad disappearance of Richey Edwards. It was a commercial success, reaching number 2 in the UK charts and 12 here in Ireland. Everything Must Go is a journey through many themes, from historical and political themes to personal and cultural. Paul, give us a background to the Manic Street Preachers.
Indeed, Dan, as you said, Everything Must Go being the fourth studio album. They kicked things off in 1992 with Generation Terrorist. They followed it up with Goal Against the Soul. And then comes the Holy Bible, Dan. And that is the Manic's fan album. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Even after all these years, fans absolutely love it. The thing that's really interesting about being a Manic's fan is that it's a bit like being part of an exclusive club, or a bit like supporting a football team. I suppose like supporting a football team, sometimes the Manics might let you down a little bit, but then you're always delighted the next time when there's a good comeback, or when they, score the equivalent of a goal with a great single or a great album. But Holy Bible was a completely different sort of sounding album to Everything Must Go. Everything Must Go was just a huge departure for the band. And that's indicated in the title, Dan. Everything Must Go. I think it came from a play of the same name from Patrick Jones, Nicky Wire's brother. But when you think about those words, everything must go, it, in one sense it implies like a fire sale, like something that's closing down, and everything must go, have a sale. It also implies a break with the past, and that implies a kind of a promising future as well, and a big clear out. And that's really, where the Manics were at that point in their career. They emerged from that very difficult period with the album, which they themselves have said is their best. Certainly for me, is their best, and that's a big thing to say about a band with their back catalogue. Something controversial to say that, of course, because the real hardcore Manics fans will probably say they won't probably say, they'll definitely say it's a Holy Bible. That's the one that they'll say is the best of the band albums. But for me, it's Everything Must Go. 12 tunes, 4 hit singles, and to this day still packs a really good, strong emotional punch. Every song is good. There isn't a bad track on it. I love the intensity of it, Dan. There's this intense sound from beginning, middle to end. And although it comes right slap bang in sort of the height of the Britpop period, you couldn't say it's Britpop. But equally, you couldn't say it's certainly not American rock, because in many ways it's a rebuke of American rock. And they had moved away from that sort of heavy American sound. That kind of the Guns N' Roses thing had been sort of ditched at that stage. But what an album, Dan, and I think still stands the test of time almost 25 years after its release. You're listening to The Big Album Show with Paul and Dan. Please remember to subscribe, hit like, and remember to follow us on our social media platforms at The Big Album Show.
I think it's 45 minutes of sheer bliss. It was produced by Mike Hedges, and I think you can see, as you say, a departure from the style the Manics had previous to this album. So, talking about the album themselves, the band described some of the songs as having a kind of a Motown-esque, Phil Spector-esque wall of sound. And you can hear things like strings, harp, different kinds of instrumentation on various tracks. Another thing about the Manics is that as musicians, they are all incredible. We know that the lyrical quality of the songs is it's just out of this world amazing. But
Yeah.
sometimes I think that people almost overlook the actual musicianship of the members of the band because the lyrics are so good. So if you look at, say, James Dean Bradfield, for instance, some of the guitar riffs that he comes out with on this album, on albums before this and albums after this, are just some of the most memorable guitar riffs you'll ever hear. He writes songs in alternative tunings like, Kevin Carter and other songs. And then on top of that, not only is he playing these wonderful guitar parts, he's also singing in that, some might describe it as a kind of a Freddie Mercury-esque style voice, in that he sings in quite a high register. Try and sing along with Manic Street Preachers songs, and I think most lads anyway find it difficult to sing along with them because they're sung quite high up. Then you look at, Nicky Wire, incredible bass player, incredible showman, and incredible lyricist. And then, of course, you have Sean Moore, not only an incredible drummer, but also he is the person playing the trumpet on Kevin Carter, for example. He's a classically trained musician. He is he played at one stage with a jazz orchestra in Wales. But before this show, Paul, I was looking back on different interviews with the band, and one of the things that I noticed is Sean Moore tends to not say much in
This is
interviews.
true.
What
I think you can't just get a word in edgeways with the two other guys, with Nicky and James Dean Bradfield. For interested, you should say it though, Dad. I mean, there's some absolutely classic Manics performances that people should check out. Check out their '90s shows, their Glastonbury '90s shows in the '90s. There's a Reading show that they did in the '90s. Check out Louder Than War, which is about the show they did in Cuba in 2001. And on that, you'll see there's an interview with Castro and the band. I mean, Castro kind of turns up when they're in Santa Clara, and he comes into this crowded room, and the band are there. But one of the interesting things about it is he's talking to Nicky and James Dean Bradfield for almost the entire conversation. They're the ones to the forefront. But then Castro kind of reaches out, and he brings Sean Moore into the conversation at the end, and he kind of puts his hand on Sean's shoulder, and Sean just looks at him kind of he looks a little bit scared, to be honest. But you're absolutely right. And one of the interesting things about the band for me is they are at their best when you see them live or when you hear them live. And they're great on record, there's no doubt about it. But seeing them live and it's a fantastic experience. I've seen them. The first time I saw them was back in 2002 in the Point Depot. They played, would you believe, 2 nights in the Point Depot then, and that was a time when they so in more recent years they tend to play the Olympia Theatre in Dublin. But then they played a number of big arena shows in the Point in the '90s, including Fail, I think, in 1996. That first show, I remember thinking it wasn't the best gig I ever saw with the Manics, but some of their later shows have just been absolutely fantastic for me. And the ones in the Olympia, always stand out. I saw the Holy Bible tour there, and yeah, as you could see the intensity of the relationship between the fans and the band, and that's one of the really, really interesting things. I mean, about Manics fans, they're incredibly loyal to the band. Oftentimes, the feelings are very intense. The relationship between the band and the fans can be intense. I remember the gig in 2007. Certain members of the audience were wearing the balaclavas. Just throw back to the band in their early years. So there is that kind of relationship between the band and the fans. There's a loyalty there, and I kind of, I suppose, a very strong bond. Have you seen them live yourself, Dan?
Yeah, I'm happy to say I've seen the Manic Street Preachers 3 times, and the gig that stands out to me was the first time I saw them. And let me just tell you about that gig, because it really was a standout experience for me. So it was way back in 2001. It's 20 years ago this May, because the gig was on the 4th of May 2001, and it was part of the Heineken Green Energy Festival, which used to be a festival that happened in different locations around the country. But this year they had it in a place in Dublin called Smithfield. So it's a kind of a square in Dublin near the River Liffey, and it had just been refurbished. This is was in the height of a period known here in Ireland as the Celtic Tiger, where the country was kind of doing well for the first time. So there was this kind of feeling of things on the up. And as I say, the place had just been refurbished. To give you an example, they had just installed these massive 12 massive masts in the square. They were about 30 foot high with 2 meter tall flames coming out of them. Now the masts are still there, but I can count on two fingers how many times I've ever seen the flames lighten, because they're probably too expensive to have on all the time. But they were on during this Manic's gig, and it added to the atmosphere. It was the last year of the punt, and I was just gone 15, and my friend had got 2 tickets to see the Manic Street Preachers, supported by JJ72. So JJ72, they were an Irish band led by a guy called Mark Greeny. They came on, they did a decent set, and at the end of the set, Mark Greeny picked up his Fender Stratocaster and bashed it off the floor of the stage in a kind of a rock and roll Clash style, let's smash things up moment. And then the Manic Street Preachers came on afterwards, and they started with "Found That Soul," great tune. But you had Nicky Wire. He comes on. He has this feather boa wrapped around the mic stand. He had a kilt. He later changed halfway through the set and put on a lovely white dress and a Burberry hat. But they played an incredible set list, and a large portion of the set list was made up of songs from Everything Must Go. And at the end of the gig, as if to show the youngsters in JJ72 how rock and roll was really done, Nicky Wire decides to smash up the stage. He jumps up on top of some of the amps on the stage. He kicked over or pushed over a large Fender amp onto the ground. I believe he threw his bass through the drum kit. He went hell for leather, and the crowd erupted. They actually finished the set that night with the song "Design for Life." And as a 15-year-old, standing there in that crowd with the energy of the fans and the energy of what was going on stage, it was just incredible. But a funny thing was, it shows you how lax things were at the time. So because it was a music festival, and there was drink being served, and all the tickets, it said 18-year-olds, under 18s must be accompanied by an adult. So me, 15-year-old Dan, and his 15-year-old mate rock up to the gig, and we're standing in the queue for the gig, and the bouncers say, "How's it going, lads? Do you have any ID there?" And we said, "No, we don't." And they said, "What age are you?" And I was honest with them. I said, "Well, I'm 15." And they said, "Well, it's over 18s." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I did." And you'll never believe what they did. They said, "Do you have a mobile phone?" I said, "I do." And they said, "Well, come over here." And they took my mobile phone off me, and they rang my mum, and they asked my mum, did I have permission to go to the concert? And when she said yeah, they said, "Yeah, go in, fire ahead." So we were able to go to the gig. But it's just funny how times have changed, you know.
It is, Dan. It's, and funny to think about the band at that stage, because of course they had Everything Must Go, they'd had This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours, and then they had Know Your Enemy, and that's the tour that you saw them on, which was the same tour that they played. Know Your Enemy was the album they visited Cuba in the aftermath of as well in 2001. And of course, one of the things is people talk about the Rolling Stones being the first rock band to play Cuba. Not only did the Rolling Stones not play Smithfield in Dublin, the Manic Street Preachers beat them to Cuba as the first Western rock band to play. About a decade and a half before the Rolling Stones played Cuba, the Manic Street Preachers did. Of course, nobody in Cuba knew anything about them or knew who they were, but they played the Karl Marx Theatre in Havana, and anyone who's seen them live, I think, will have memories. And it's often a very special experience. And one of the interesting things, Dan, I think that you see at Manic's shows is that it's not a passive kind of relationship. It's not the band up there doing their thing and then the fans simply respond. And there's a feeling that people almost feel, and it's, remember that thing, that the fourth member of the band, it's you guys, that there is that sense of it with the Manic Street Preachers, that the band and the fans are very much interrelated. And there's a lovely moment. And if Everything Must Go, when you think about it, I mean, look, it's the classic Manic song. It is just a great tune. The best version of that song for me, Dan, is the version they play and the Manic Millennium gig, which was a huge stadium gig they did just on the eve of the new millennium back in 1999. If you can cast your mind back, and the show was it was a huge show. I think it was 50,000-60,000 people, but the BBC used it as they went live, and it ushered in the new millennium on the BBC, and went right around the world. It's a fantastic gig, and many of the songs on Everything Must Go are played in that gig. And there's a great moment just before they do a Design for Life. James Dean Bradfield pays tribute to the various members of the band. He does a lovely tribute to Nicky, to Nicky and Sean, but also to Richey Edwards. And just before they kick into a Design for Life, he says to the fans, "You've done us proud." And there's a sense that it's the band and the fans are what people are seeing. And it's just a lovely moment. And that version of a Design for Life, at one point, James Dean Bradfield has kind of dropped his guitar, so you really get this very nice version of it, which is far less rocky than the normal version. But Everything Must Go Down, I mean, it has to be said, it is the standout track on a standout album from a standout band.
Would that be one of your top three?
Sorry, a Design for Life would be certainly one of my top three. A Design for Life, the song is certainly one of my top three for sure. How about you?
Yeah, it would. It would be up there, and I think you can't talk about either the song "Design for Life" or the Manic Street Preachers without kind of talking about their, I suppose, their politics and their intellectualism. Like, this is a band that weren't afraid to deal with really kind of complex issues of things like class, culture, and Design for Life deals with all of those things, and indeed history. I mean, the first opening lines of the song, "Libraries gave us power, then work came and made us free." Like, those lines are on fire. They conjure up dark images, the darkest images immediately. And then there's a reflection on how society is governed, and then you have that roaring chorus of, "We don't talk about love, we only want to get drunk, and we are not allowed to spend." Like, those lines encapsulate so much in so few lines, and also they encapsulate kind of conflicting emotion, and in a way I've kind of never heard.
Yeah, and it's just an amazing song and amazing lyrics, and everything about it is special. And it gets right up there to almost to the top of the charts. Goes to number two in the charts. I mean, they did have two number one singles. If You Tolerate This, Your Children Will Be Next. Did get to number one, and Masses Against the Classes also got to number one. And that's sometimes the tune that's a little bit forgotten about, Masses Against the Classes, because and often you don't hear it played at shows. But it's another really good tune. I mean, for me, Everything Must Go. It is defined by that sort of big stadium rock sound, which is still very emotional at the same time. So I mean, I absolutely love A Design for Life. I love Everything Must Go, the title track from the album, which is addressed, more or less to the fans. I just hope you will forgive us, but Everything Must Go. And again, it's impossible to imagine any other band other than the Manic Street Preachers having a song like that one. But for me, actually, probably my personal favorite on the album is the track Australia, which I think was the fourth single, if memory serves me correctly, from the album. And again, what it's all about is a kind of a sense of escapism. And Australia is the farthest point in the world away from Wales. And you mentioned the lyrics in the album, Dan, and there's just again, these are real. They're Nicky's lyrics, and when he says, "I don't know if I'm tired, I don't know if I'm ill. my cheeks are turning yellow. I think I'll take another pill. And there's just, again, it's that urgency and that intensity of it that just grabs you. And later, I think that song Australia was used in an advertising campaign for Australia for tourist purposes. But that's the Manics,
Yeah,
the many
and
sides of the Manic Street Preachers, Dan.
it was also used. Do you remember there was a TV show called The Renford Rejects about a school football team? It was set in the UK, but it was one of these kind of kids shows. But weirdly enough, Australia was the theme tune to the TV show. But it is an upbeat song about escapism. Definitely upbeat in terms of its sound, not necessarily all its lyrics. But yeah, I'd agree with you. It's a really, really good, powerful song.
The other single from the album, Everything Must Go, was a single. The other single, of course, from the album was Kevin Carter,
Mm.
which it slightly divides opinion. For me, it's one of the slightly weaker tracks on the album. It's about the photographer Kevin Carter, and again, there's a real, it packs a real emotional punch. And it's a classic Manic song, because you know that soaring chorus that's there,
Mm.
and it's sing along, but equally, you know, what you're singing about is a very serious topic.
Yeah, well, for me, I actually have that down as one of my top three songs on the album. The lyrics written by Richey. Um, the guitar, wonderful. I mentioned it earlier on. Written in a kind of an open G tuning, which makes it sound unusual. Um, yeah, written. Only the Manics could write about a photographer like Kevin Carter and make it into a successful chart-topping song. You know, Kevin Carter, for people who don't know, he was a South African photographer, and he was responsible for taking famous photographs, but disturbing, very, very disturbing photographs. And I, don't- I it's probably not the show to get into the moral argument around his photographs and all this stuff, but he won various prizes for photographs. Like one of the ones that stands out is called "The Vulture and the Little Girl," a harrowing photograph. And unfortunately, Kevin Carter sadly died by suicide at age 33. So the content, lyrical content of the song is incredibly, incredibly heavy. But love the music, love Sean Moore's trumpet solo. Again, a trumpet solo in the middle of a rock song.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of, but it's just it just works so well on this song. Really love this song. Really love it.
Another brilliant track, Dan, off the album is "The Girl Who Wanted to Be God."
Oh yeah.
That's the lyrics in that were co-written by Nicky Ware and Richey Edwards, and that's just, there's a real triumphalist feel off that song, isn't there?
There is, yeah, yeah, really, really strong, strong chorus. Definitely, you can imagine when you listen to that song, you can imagine those concerts that we were at and how the crowd
Yeah.
reacts to it.
I really love "Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky," and Elvis impersonator Blackpool Pier as well. It's just they're slightly less intense. I wouldn't call them slow, but they are more. They haven't got the loudness, mate, the consistent loudness of some of the other songs on the album, and they kind of break it up quite well. And it's a great way to start an album with Elvis impersonator Blackpool Pier, because it really sets a lovely scene. It's like a novel. It's like the first page of a novel. It sets a lovely scene where he says 20 foot high on Blackfoot Promenade. I mean, again, no one else could sing it like James Dean Bradfield, but no other band would start an album with lyrics like that.
Yeah, a great song. And it's funny that you mention it's kind of a soft song, because James Dean Bradfield, when he first kind of put the lyrics to music and brought it to the rest of the band, his initial version apparently was a really kind of heavy post punk, speeded up song. And the rest of the band said, not so much. We're not going for that on this album. So they brought down the tone of it. And I think for the better, because it is really good, and it kind of just, it has that kind of sarcastic uh commentary in it, which looks at the meaningless, I suppose, of popular culture in many ways. And
I mean, things get pretty deep pretty fast with the Manic
they
Street
do,
Preachers, don't they?
yeah, they
I mean,
really do.
they really do. I mean, but there was something about both their live shows, and about their music, which is trying to kind of show a better way, isn't it? They're trying to lift the sort of horizons of the fans to
Yeah,
see something different, and to see something better. Maybe it's almost like a political manifesto. Their music, and I think they play with that very, very well. I think they're very aware of what they're doing there.
definitely. They're like, the Manics are so deep that even when they're not trying to be that deep, I read deeply into their lyrics, right? Because when I first kind of listened to Everything Must Go, which we mentioned earlier on, and as you say, Everything Must Go, the song, like, it is a mess. Like, Nicky Wire himself says, it's a message to the fans about kind of the change of direction of the band, right? But when I read it, I suppose I'm not wrong in saying this, because there's that school of literary criticism which suggests that it's the listener or the reader that brings the meaning to the song. So I'm coming at it from that angle. But I kind of initially thought it was a reflection on kind of the Thatcher Reagan period, the Cold War, and the closure of mines in Wales. Because now, this is a bit of a hot take, but bear with me on this, because if you look at the lyrics, right, there's a lyric like "escape from our history," which I thought echoed Fukuyama's 1992 comment on the fall of the Soviet Union being the end of history. And there's another line that they say, "freed from the century with nothing but memories." Um, and various other lines like that. And then, of course, the title, Everything Must Go, I thought it kind of suggested a connection with the sale of public assets. So I was reading far too deeply into the song, but it's definitely a good hot take, I think.
That's a very good hot take, Dan. And I mean, one of the interesting things about the Manic Street Preachers is they constantly throughout their career, they look back and they look forward. And when you listen to a tune like "The Next Jet to Leave Moscow," which is on Futurology, which was, I think, a 2014 album by the band, he says the lyrics are. An old jaded commie walking in Red Square with red diffusion eyes of yesteryear. I'm the biggest living hypocrite you'll ever see, because the market never lies and your conscience is so clear. And the Manic's lyrics are subject to debate. There's they can be very, very clear and very, very obvious, and then you can also read quite a lot into them, as you've just done there. And that's the art in it, isn't it? Really, I mean, that's and again, that's they're able to do this, and they have the confidence to do it as well. And look, you get criticism for doing that as well, because they don't always get it right. But many, many times they do absolutely get it right. And I think that's one of the reasons why fans have such a connection with the band. It's the emotion, it's the passion, and it's what that music comes to mean to you. I mean, maybe it's old fashioned, but this is music that means something, isn't it, Dan? And I can have a very, very strong memory of, say, cast my own mind back 20 years ago when I started college. It wasn't uncommon. There wasn't that many kind of lefties, but of the lefties that there were hanging around, it was very common that they'd have a little satchel or a little bag on their back, and they'd have stitched in, that it was a little like a badge of Che Guevara, and maybe something about Genoa and the anti-capitalist protests, and then they'd have something about the Manic Street Preachers. It's that kind of band, and it really means something to people, and you've got to love it. And we saw this ourselves, Dan, when we put out on social media that we were talking about the band. We probably won't mention names. Some of them are prominent people on Irish Twitter. But people were very, very passionate about the band. Somebody commented that back in the day before the internet, actually being able to decipher those lyrics was a real challenge, and people often got them wrong because they'd be listening to James Dean Bradfield, and they'd misunderstand him from his accent. But again, it's the sort of band that people used to go and say, let's figure out what they're trying to say here, like a poem, like a novel, like a film. There, people try to figure out the meaning, and there's not that many bands that can do that. Certainly not in the mainstream.
Funny when that you mentioned college, right? Because I have a memory of you in college, and because we went to college together, at various stages of our college career, I suppose you'd say. But I remember one time walking through Belfield campus, which is the
Oh
college
God,
where
what did I say?
College Dublin is, but. No, it was around 2007, it must have been, because the album Send Away the Tigers was out. And we
Yeah,
were just taking a stroll, and I remember having this massive conversation with you about the Manics. It was kind of we both discovered that each of us were Manics fans, and you were mad into the single that was out, "Your Love Alone Is Not Enough," and we were just we were having the kind of conversation we're having today, just walking around, but you could talk about the Manics for hours and
yeah,
hours and hours because they're so brilliant, they're so deep, they're so kind of intellectual. But saying that, they're also just music lovers themselves, and they're
yeah,
not afraid to just enjoy music because you talked about them having a few misses as well as hits, and it's true, they did. And but not in a bad way. I think they have the misses because they love music so much. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about. So they've done cover versions of songs like Last Christmas by Wham and Umbrella by Rihanna, right? And like, I'm not mad into those songs necessarily, and I don't know whether it kind of fits with the Manics image, but I love the fact they're not afraid to do covers of those songs, and they just enjoy the music. And I think it's so refreshing to see a band who
yeah.
can go from writing really uh, dark, political, emotional, historical songs, to see them going from that to doing a Rihanna cover. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and it is, and there oftentimes is a great sense of fun, and when you see the band live, you see that they talk about people who are absolutely loving it, like they often come across as people having a serious, they're really present, they're really enjoying it when they're up on stage, and there is a sense that I've had when I've seen the Manics, that the the relationship between the band and the fans, it's not the typical relationship between band and fans. People love them, but it's almost as if you're all equals together. Mannix and the fans, and the band, the fans being the fourth member of the band. You kind of get that sense, and it's one of the things that I really love about the band. I love Mannix fans myself. I think Mannix fans are absolutely fantastic. I mean, down through the years, I see there's a certain number of people who I always meet at Mannix fans, and they're great, great people. And I've often bumped into people that I haven't seen in years. Oh, I haven't seen you since I last saw the Mannix. The fans are loyal to them, and they come back again and again and again. And I think that's good. So fair play to all the Manic fans. Another song on off the album, Dan, that I absolutely love is the song that completes the album. It's track 12. It's No Surface of Feeling. How do you feel about that track, Dan? I think that is it's a great, great way to end an album, because sometimes bands traditionally they'd start with a fast sort of song to bring you in. They start with a kind of slower song to bring you in, and then maybe bands would finish with a nice quiet song at the end, almost to put you to sleep. You listen to the whole album before you go to bed, and then the last song puts you to sleep. They finish with a real heavy rock tune that just you just want to get up and start singing along to it, don't you?
Oh yeah, it definitely leaves you on a high. Again, lyrics absolutely class. Really kind of a shoegazy style heaviness, heavy guitars, distortion, all of that definitely leaves you on a high. And you're right, I've never thought about it like that. Like, I do love going to sleep to a good album, but yeah, this is definitely not an album that puts me to sleep because as you say, there's no bad track on the album, and what a way to finish a masterpiece. Yeah, it's a brilliant song.
No Surface All Feeling also has guitar work from Richey Edwards on it, which I think was the only song where his guitar was ever actually recorded and available in that way. So there's something a little bit special, I think, about that song from that point of view as well. And some great live versions of that around as well. So something that if you're not familiar with the band and you're not familiar with the album, you might enjoy. So then, almost 25 years on, the 20th of May 1996, everything is different now. I think it's fair to say the record industry has changed, music has changed, bands have changed. It's kind of difficult to imagine a band like the Manics today, but they're still going, emerging today. Rather, the Manics themselves, of course, are still going strong. They'll never be repeated. There'll never be another Manics, but hopefully we'll have them around with us for a long time yet, producing great music. The Manics will be in town in Dublin next summer supporting the Killers. The last time I saw them was supporting Bon Jovi, so I will be at that show and watching them support the Killers next summer in Dublin. They're also playing a gig in support of the NHS in Britain. It had to be postponed. I can't quite recall where the venue is, but they're doing that show for and that's very typical of them. They say they know a lot of people working in the NHS, so they're doing a special show for NHS workers. So fair play to them. I think Liam Gallagher is doing one as well. Very different character to the Manics, but there you go. So then overall, I mean, I'm just going to give my little hot take on this album. I mean, this for me, Everything Must Go. I mean, I think it's very easy to have a personal relationship with an album like this. It's something that can come to mean a lot to you. So I would strongly recommend it to people if they haven't heard it, go and get it. Everything Must Go and listen to it from start. Listen to start, middle, and finish. It's got everything for me. It's got great tunes. There's a Motown vibe running through it, as you say. There's that sense that you could hear a song like A Design for Life on a jukebox, which was what it was intended to be. For me, it's a very, very special album. I'm going to give it a very, very healthy 9 out of 10. There's no. I mean, we haven't gone 10 out of 10 quite yet. Maybe sometime we will. But for me, it's 9 out of 10, and a great album by a great band. Absolutely love them. Highly recommend it. What do you think?
Yeah. It means the world to me as well. It's one of those albums that kind of it was part of the soundtrack to my life at that period of time, kind of my early teens, and it's one of those albums that I've always continued to turn back to. And every time I turn to it, I hear something new and I delve into the lyrics and the music in a way I didn't before. It's absolutely remarkable that the band managed to pull off such a wonderful masterpiece, given the space they were in terms of suffering the loss of a very close friend. And people often say this is the first Manics album without Richey on it, but I disagree because Richey's music and lyrics is all over this album, and his influence is there. It's a fantastic album. It really brought the Manics into the mainstream, for want of a better phrase. It brought their music to a new audience, and it set them up for the decade ahead. So for me, I am going to completely agree with you. I think this is deserving of a 9, if not more. And I definitely recommend it to people. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed, looking into this album, listening to it again. And you mentioned some of the stuff on YouTube. YouTube is full of brilliant Manics material. There's loads of documentaries, loads of gigs. It's just there's so many fantastic resources if people want to dive into the Manic story. Check it all out.
And the best thing about being a Manics fan is that there's lots more good stuff to come. And so for now, we'd like to thank you we will no doubt be back to the Manics on the Big Album Show. But for now, we want to thank you for listening. Just to remind everyone, please make sure you follow us on our social media at the Big Album Show, and make sure to like and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts, and please spread the word. And thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it.
You're listening to the Big Album Show with Paul Dillon and Dan O'Neill.